Welcome to Caribbean Tea. From St. Vincent, Kendall Morgan, in Georgetown, Guyana, Dennis Chabral, and I am Vivian Williams in New York. The discovery of Adrianna Younge's lifeless body in a hotel swimming pool is clear evidence of institutional cracks in Guyana. This is a case study in failed crisis management. Guyana is one of the world's fastest growing economies, but with economic prosperity must also come effective issues and crisis management. The road ahead will be filled with tough issues and crises that the country must navigate effectively and successfully. The death of this little girl is a clear indication that Guyana has to get its act together very, very quickly. In the early stages, which is very critical, the case was discussed as one of homicide. The theory that developed and spread very rapidly was that of a little girl who was murdered and her body dumped in a swimming pool. Statements made by the Guyana police force fuel this narrative. Now the government is walking that back amidst chaos and rioting in the capital city of the country.
The forensic pathologists, as you know, as Frank said, were brief. And they started the work sometime around 1:20 p.m. That's when the autopsy examination commenced. And the objectives of the examination were to identify signs of trauma or injuries to the body, detect signs of sexual violence, collect appropriate forensic samples, document the postmortem examination through photographs and videography, determine the cause of death. Upon completing the procedure, the forensic pathologists rule out signs of physical and sexual trauma on Ms. Younge's body. After careful deliberation, the team concluded that Ms. Younge died as a result of drowning. Ms. Younge's relatives were briefed following the examination and informed of the medical cause of death. Due to the state of the decomposition of Ms. Younge's body, the pathologists were unable to provide an exact time of death. The relatives were also informed that the pathologists ruled out theories of forcible drowning or any other means of killing, followed by disposal of the body in water.
So, what happened in the last moments of this little girl's life? That's a mystery that may never be solved. This is a special program of Caribbean Tea. Our guests this week are Professor Ivelaw Griffith. Professor Griffith has written extensively on crime and security in the Caribbean. His writings have informed policy and discussions on security and crime in the Caribbean and across the world. Also with us today is former Commissioner of Police of Trinidad and Tobago, Gary Griffith, and Guyana's Assistant Commissioner of Police, retired, Paul Slow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian. The thing is very worrying because if you were to follow the sequence of events, clearly something is seriously amiss. And just to give a quick background, the child went missing on Wednesday. The child went to the Doubleday Hotel located at Tushan at East Bank of Esquibo on Wednesday with her grandmother. They went there to swim. The child was sent to some area there to purchase a band to put on her hand, indicative of her permission for her to swim in the pool. The grandmother reported that perhaps within the 2 hours after then, she discovered the child missing. An alarm was raised, and searches, even perfunctory, was done. A report was made to the police. The police are said to have gone there and they did a search, and the child could not have been found. The father turned up. They too, I understand, police summoned, police went there, no body found. They decided they're going to camp out. That's the father and other concerned persons camped out in front of the hotel the entire night. We have a video recording of Mikhail Rodriguez, known as Guyanese critic, said to have been made Wednesday night, the very Wednesday night that the child went missing, showing the pool and showing that there was no body in the pool. That was a video recording with commentary, which says that there was clearly no one in the pool. And then the very Wednesday night, police gave a statement to say that this child was seen entering a red and black car. They give the description, the license plate number, heading in an eastern direction, and tried to persuade the people who were out there to remove. That did not happen. They did not move because the father said he was convinced that the child was still in the premises of the hotel. The following morning, again, it is said that people went there and searched again, and this child was not seen at the pool.
I'm amazed at what came out here. I listened to the father on the video saying that this morning family members and the police searched the pool and the premises, and there was no body, or the young lady was not found in the premises or in the pool.
Then what we have, police making another announcement that the child was seen some distance away at a bus stop, and people were urged to go there. They did not move again because they seem to have been convinced that that was a ruse to get them away from the scene. Shortly thereafter, as far as we understand, an alarm was raised and the child was then seen in the.
I don't know why there is a delay in releasing this footage, because this is very inconsistent with the entire story. If you viewed footage that showed the young lady entering into a car, you gave a specific car number and the color and the make of the car, and they drove off. Then release the footage that you viewed. We want to see it too, as a country.
Given the sequence of events, it is clear that the report that was being given by the police and others is false. The police actually admitted that they gave erroneous information with respect to the whereabouts of this child. I think that operated in a manner to cause the public to lack confidence in whatever else the police said in relation to this particular matter. I think I will stop there now.
You said the pool was searched, and that really raises an important question. And the question really is, was the search sufficient? And so there's a question as to whether or not someone who holds a smartphone in a live Facebook or some other stream over a pool and say, look, I'm holding my phone over the pool and I'm conducting a search, and that the lens of the camera cannot detect anyone in that pool, whether that would be sufficient to determine, as a matter of conclusion and as a matter of fact, that there was in fact no one in the pool at the time. These are questions that experts would have to interrogate and provide answers to. These are questions that you expect that the police force and the authorities would have addressed immediately. The vice president repeated that the search was done by the police and the search was done by other members of the public. But the nature of the search was never discussed. The sufficiency of the search was never discussed.
This girl was not in this pool.
I would say that the pivotal question really is, was there a search in the afternoon of the disappearance of the girl, the evening of her disappearance, on the morning prior to her discovery, that one could say, on the basis of that search, that conclusively Nobody was in the pool at the time.
Well, let me begin by thanking you, Vivian and Dennis and Kendall, for the invitation. And this conversation again resonates not only with Guyana, but across the region. Let me share three observations, one of which connects to something that Paul said. My first observation, in some respects, connects an element to what you said, Vivian, in the opening. This matter so far has not been deemed a criminal act, but the whole tenor of the conversation has to do with criminality. And what it suggests to me is that the sensitivities and the aftermath of the body being discovered, the rioting and the burning, suggests that there is a sensitivity across the nation of things about the police management, especially coming in the wake of what happened in Linden with police killings of 2 young men, especially coming in the wake of concern about the appointment of a commissioner of police. I think it represents an anxiety, a sensitivity, some concerns in the broader society. That's my first observation. So the Adrianna Younge incident is about more than just Adrianna Younge. That's my first point. Here's my second point. Paul maybe can correct me, and maybe you, Vivian, can correct me, because I'm in New York and not in. But I was bemused by the absence of a press conference by the Commissioner of Police and a team that would say to the nation beyond, here are the facts, here are the circumstances, here is what's being done, here is what we intend to do. It seems to me that the general normal protocol for something as high profile as this would see, if not daily, at least periodic briefings by the top hierarchy of the police force. It is obvious to me, and I'm sure to others, that there is either a breakdown in the protocol for public communication or the absence of a protocol for public communication. Yes, you can have facts being misread, misinterpreted, but it seems to me that in the whole management of the communication strategy with the public, something is either amiss or went wrong by virtue of the absence. So sensitivities, absence of any communication by the police force publicly, and something about the management with the absence of the commissioner team enabling the public to understand what's happening. Those are my first 3 points.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, Professor Griffith. My friend, Paul, good to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Gary.
This here is almost identical to what transpired just about 27 odd years ago in Trinidad and Tobago with Akil Chambers, if you all aware, if you all ever heard about the Akil Chambers situation. 27 years later, and this was a young man, about 11 years old. He went to a birthday party. He died in it was a swimming pool. Forensic testing, they made a mess of it. The DNA samples and so forth went missing. Accusations were made about a previous minister that was in government, that him being involved. This is almost identical. And 27 years later, the police are still being questioned about it. Fingers are still being pointed. And the reason I relate that to 27 years later, this situation, it has a lot to do with the level of trust and confidence that the public would have in the police service. Because if there is some degree of confidence that, like the commissioner, for example, as Professor Griffith just said, a commissioner has to come forward with confidence to say, this is what is happening, and make it abundantly clear that we know that for sure that there is no such concern that there is some degree of clandestine situation with us trying to cover it up. Anytime the public starts believing that there's a cover-up, that there's poor investigation, immediately public trust and confidence erodes in the police service, and that plays a big part towards increased crime, because the public plays a big part to assisting the police to reduce crime by giving information. Public trust and confidence is critical. So this is what I'm hearing here. It seems from hearing from Paul, it seems that there's a great degree of distrust in how the public perceives this matter being dealt with, and that, I think, is the main issue that should be dealt with.
Running parallel to the concern about the lack of information coming from the police is the fact that there seems to be not just in this case, but you see it happening around major events across the Caribbean, a parallel provision of information from members of the public. That is, and the public seem to, by and large, gravitate most often to these informal sources of information. Gentlemen, you are all associated with the national security apparatus in the Caribbean. How big a problem is this generally, and how big a problem was it in the case of that you're describing in Guyana, where public information may have led to some of the protest action and the other scenes across Georgetown?
Well, let me say this. We're not only talking here about lack of information, but as I've said in the introduction, it is what is giving also false information. You're giving information that turns out to be false, which compounds the whole mistrust in the police. If the lack of information is bad as it is, but when you proceed to give information, which you yourself have to admit at a later stage was wrong, then I would think that the whole confidence in the system, whatever confidence they might have been, perhaps is completely eroded.
When you consider, along with that, when you consider the fact that you've got a whole ecosystem of social media,
Right.
where sensationalism drives the order of the day, sometimes social media practitioners are not concerned about the veracity of the information, they're concerned with the facts. They've got their alternative facts, and their alternative facts is now colored by the sensational, and that drives, in the absence of the police coming forward with accurate, credible, consistent information, the social media input serves to not only reinforce the gap, but undermine the confidence, any degree of confidence had in the police, and not only the police, in the broader system.
It is very clear to me as president that the events surrounding this entire sad situation is definitely a point of examination and re-examination of a number of things. First of all, and I intend to bring in international and regional help to look at our existing laws, regulations, and SOPs in relation to policing work, in relation to laws governing missing persons. And when I say laws, I'm not only speaking about laws covering the police and police operation, SOPs covering the police and police operation, or only relating this to the police. We also have to look at laws, SOPs, rules, regulations covering public places.
I was just following very quickly on what the president of Guyana was saying, and I'm making the point that as far as my recollection goes, as far as the management of pools are concerned, under the rules, if not the regulations or the laws governing hotels and the tourist and areas of where tourists frequent, the tourism ministry had more than a decade ago established the boundaries, the requirements, where you have lifeguards on duty and you have emergency response systems in place. So that's specific to that. But what I want to say from a broad perspective is that we have a situation where there is a lot of talk about what should or should not be done, but at the end of the day, little is actually done. And I go back to the point of public relations. This matter of poor or non-existent public relations by the Guyana police force dates back to several years. There was a mechanism put in place to improve it, but we've seen over the years that it has once again been degraded. And now we're faced with a crisis that really is as a result of the decision makers at diverse levels. They have caused this upon themselves because they're not allowing the system to work in the way it ought to work. And we have seen where it is a heavy top-down approach. You ask questions in the police WhatsApp group for the media, you see clarifications, no one is answering. Your own thrust is really to seek the truth, seek accuracy, but at the end of the day, you are provided with little or no information. We have requested in the police WhatsApp group very early in the day for press conferences to be conducted, for somebody to come and face the media when you're top to report. But all of that have fallen by the wayside, and we're just left to uh, be presented with periodic press releases that are subject to further clarification or question. And when you ask these questions, no one is coming back to you with any proper answers or answers at all. I can tell you that there's almost 2 days now that I've asked for a clarification in the name of the hotelier. That's the owner of the hotel that was destroyed in the aftermath of the discovery of the girl's body. And I'm still waiting for that information. My colleagues are still waiting on vital information outside of this about the implication or the alleged involvement of a number of police officers in the theft of cocaine from a police station. So we have a lot to do when it comes to broader communication, and specifically when it comes to crisis communication. A top-down, heavy approach cannot work when you're seeking to allay fears in the public domain, when you're seeking to bring the public on your side in dealing with crises rather than alienating them and resulting in a crisis such as which we see last week.
This is a good segue for our discussion on crisis management, and particularly when it comes to crimes and events of this nature that could really have tremendous impact on a nation. Dennis raised some important points, and I want to go back to where we started with the contribution on what was expected uh, in terms of the communications response from the police. I would also add the response from the owner of the hotel. But gentlemen, let's hear from you, and we will sort of build out this section on crisis management. What should be the proper uh, communications response from the police?
Well, I would like to butt in here. I mean, we spent 22 minutes, and what we have done, we spent most of the time voicing our concern, voicing us being upset about it, and complaining about the situation. We have not given solutions. And let me give you the solutions within 3 minutes. It is not difficult. I actually met with the Minister of Home Affairs and the heads of all of the protective services in Guyana just a couple of years ago, because they wanted to. I did a presentation. They couldn't understand how a police service in Trinidad and Tobago, public trust and confidence was 14%. It was the lowest of all arms in public service in the country. And in 3 years, it reached to 59%, the highest. Now it's back down to 8%. So it shows it's not the officers. It's not the officers in Guyana, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago. It has to do with leadership. And listen to what Dennis just spoke about. There's always been that, Dennis, and it's not just law enforcement heads. We have politicians do the same thing. When you're not sure of yourself, when you're not confident, when you feel you might cause further damage to the situation, you duck and run, you hide from the media. So the accessibility is one main concern we have throughout leadership in the Caribbean. It also has to do with lack of understanding modern 21st century policing, intelligence-driven policing, predictive policing. There are so many mechanisms that can transform a police service within months. We did it in Trinidad and Tobago, from things such as the police app, online reporting, putting systems to make police officers accountable, demanding that the police service must have weekly meetings with the media, making sure that the commissioner of police is immediately accessible to the public, and utilizing the type of technology that is there worldwide. We are way behind the 8 ball in CARICOM as it pertains to forensic testing, DNA testing. In Trinidad and Tobago, for example, the only data we have for persons with fingerprints or DNA are persons after you have committed a crime. DNA testing is very critical towards pinpointing perpetrators in specific areas in a room that could assist us in forensic testing. So there's a lot that can be done. We need the political will to do it. The tools are there. It is not very expensive, but it requires a degree of leadership to transform our law enforcement agencies from backward 70s and 80s policing in the 20th century to modern day 21st century policing.
Let me jump in here, because I think Gary has said the thing that I want to say. It has to do with leadership. Absolutely correct. It has to do with leadership. So if you have people at the helm of such an important institution like the police force, who for whatever reason And I have always said it's due to incompetence. They are not forthright with the media. They're not going to face, and Dennis has said it. Dennis may recall years ago under Commissioner Lewis, there was at least frequent interaction with the media, frequent. Then we had what we call them the public relations officers who were policemen. And Dennis again can tell you, you will call them and they either had the answer there and then, or very shortly, you would have been able to give the answer. Now, we have found in Guyana, in the Guyana Police Force, as of sometime around 2021, we have now what they call the Corporate Communication Unit, headed by a civilian, someone with no law enforcement experience. And it is my view, having looked at some of the releases that are given, it would appear as though because this person is not familiar with certain things, they give all manner of reports. Some of the things are ridiculous, some of the statements they are made, and that leads towards erosion of confidence in the system, because they are representing the police. And if we fast forward to what happened with this young girl, Adrianna Younge, they are saying that the false information given about the car in which this girl is said to have gone in Wednesday night was released by a civilian who is working in the control room. So I'm saying that, look, it has to do with incompetence, it has to do with the system, it has to do with checks and balances. Because how are you going to cause or information to be released by a civilian without someone with policing, law enforcement experience reviewing to say, well, yes, this is good to go? We have seen cases in Guyana. I referred to, there was a case, Dennis will be familiar with this, Sir Mars, man who was murdered somewhere in the East Bank. And would you believe that it is said that the suspect gave a video recorded confession, and that video recorded confession ended up in the media? The wife gave a statement. That's the wife of the suspect, gave a statement to the police. And that too ended up in the media to say that, to prove that statement made by the suspect were inconsistent with what the wife was saying. I am saying this, all of these things, it calls into question the professionalism of these persons who should be interacting with the media. And again, I must emphasize that many times when they decide they're going to give some information, it is not fulsome. It is not, many times it is inaccurate. We have had, let me again, we had the killing of or in Boston on the Essequibo coast. The first release that came out, it was that he attempted to take away a gun from a policeman. Evidence surfaced later, the man was lying in his bed with his wife when he was shot and killed. Then we had another case on the East Coast at a place called Maikoni on the New Year's Day, the 1st of January 2023. What came out there is that a release came out that the policeman fired one round, which passed through the suspect and hit the policeman and killed him. I should admit, the policeman and the man who he was attempting to arrest were killed in that incident. And what happened? It turned out to be totally incorrect. Even the policeman who fired the gun said that is not what happened. Then again, not so long ago to Maikoni again, a man of unsound mind, behaving disorderly. One of the villagers attempted to subdue him. Police opened fire and the man killing both. And then they came up with all kind of report that didn't make sense. And as it was pointed out, that in this age of cell phones and everybody recording and CCTV cameras, you have the images, the video recording surfacing shortly after to dispute this. Linden, we refer to Linden. The story was that the policeman, this man was wanted. Policeman went there, he saw the police, he ran. They claimed that the police, that this is a release, I'm sure their list will remember this. Policeman dressed in uniform. He saw policemen dressed in uniform. They emphasized that, and he ran. When the video surfaced shortly after, the policemen were not in uniform. They were not in uniform. So I'm saying this again to emphasize that if one, they are not giving frequent updates, and two, many times when they issue these releases, it is proven to be fall. So there goes the confidence and the trust in the system.
Is that case?
What I want to add, please, Kendall, is that in terms of the media communications WhatsApp group, all of the senior officers, including the police commissioner, the divisional commanders, the deputy commissioners of police, assistant commissioners of police, the crime chief, the traffic chief, are all in the group. And when you ask questions, no one responds. Even the Minister of Home Affairs is in a WhatsApp group. And sometimes all he does when he has to say anything is he sends a picture or he sends an emoji. And you're there inquiring about serious matters, and no one is actually responding to your queries. Not even as a matter of courtesy to say, sir, we will communicate with you in a few minutes. We're working to get the information. If indeed the public relations officer does that, you're probably waiting days or hours to get that information. While people are out there speculating on social media, providing their own accounts, providing video recordings of what transpired. So the fact of the matter is that the Guyana police force does not have a basic communication strategy, neither a crisis communication strategy. And I can say without fear of contradiction, over the past 25 years, the Guyana Press Association and individually journalists had been involved in workshops for the Guyana police force in crafting the ways in which they ought to deal with the media. But all of this have fallen by the wayside, and it is as if it never existed, much to the detriment of the entire country, as has been seen last week.
But Dennis, let me jump in here again to say that when I was in the force, I retired in 2010. We had assistance from the British, the people from UK came, and with the assistance of the local press association, a policy was drafted. I was a part of that, because prior to that, the people who could have communicated with the media, it was a very restricted group, 4 or 5 persons only. We widened that during that process, and that started to take place. But then suddenly, over the past maybe 10, 15 years or so, this whole thing has gone through the window, and no one wants to give the media information. It is left now as we speak, to the corporate communications unit. And as Dennis has indicated, oftentimes they don't respond, and that is a worrying thing.
I want to come back to the point about confidence and how confidence might be restored, in part, linking it to the video that we heard a review just last, with President Ali made a commitment to have regional and international colleagues, organizations, experts come in. I have not heard who some of these international and regional bodies will be, but I do know there's a lot of skepticism about a last incident where a regional body was brought in. Trust and confidence in that body's outcome still is a matter of concern in the public domain. And I know not only within Guyana, but within the diaspora. So I'm wondering to what extent, and this is a question for Paul and Dennis, maybe I missed it, but what have been the international bodies that have been announced that will be part, setting aside the people who came for the autopsies? I haven't heard anything about who are some of these international agencies, international bodies. Maybe
no, that to the best of my understanding is just a statement of intent. There are no details so far.
Well, I could give some examples to that. Like with Trinidad and Tobago, that's what I did. Public trust and confidence was an all-time low, and I admitted I brought in international experts. I brought in Mayor Rudy Giuliani, regardless of what people say about him. His organization did a lot to transform the image of the NYPD. They were known as pigs. Within 2 years, they became known as America's finest. I brought them to Trinidad and Tobago to deal with public relations, customer service training, and with police officers. I twinned with the NYPD, signed a bilateral agreement, and was able to utilize the NYPD to form the gender-based violence unit, because we had a serious problem with abuse of women, children, and the elderly. We were able to form the social media monitoring response team, because gangs make a lot of information, live information on social media that can assist in preventing crime or solve crime. So there were a lot of different units that we brought into Trinidad and Tobago to assist us. When we formed that new DNA bank and forensic testing, it was to minimize the hiccups and the ball being dropped, similar to the young situation that we are now hearing about, similar to the Akil Chambers situation. So we did all of this. And again, going back, utilizing the NYPD and so forth. everything Paul just spoke about, we put an end to it by two words: body cameras. It became a standard operational procedure. When I left as Commissioner of Police, it was mandatory. Failure for you to wear body cameras in Trinidad parlance, you get a throat bust. You'll be suspended immediately. The body camera was there. With the body cameras, every single thing Paul spoke about would have been dealt with. And what I had to do was to drill the police officers not to believe the body cameras are there to set you up, but to be able to protect you, because Trinidad and Tobago is a situation where many persons will probably give false information and the police officer will be targeted. So I had to buy into the police officers to let them know this is going to help you when wrongfully accused. The body cameras, minimum use of force from tasers, pepper spray. All of these things were put in place, and it caused the public to start believing in the police service because the body cameras were there. As soon as I left, the two commissioners after me immediately shut down. You shut down a standard operational procedure, making it mandatory to put on body cameras. We had live cameras on the dashboard of police vehicles, which even NYPD, Chicago, Detroit, LA, they don't have. That live camera will provide footage to a National Operations Center, which was a system recommended by the Commission of Inquiry into the attempted coup to prevent a repeat of 1990 that happened in Trinidad and Tobago. So a National Operations Center, Operational Command Center, Commissioner's Command Center. So we got all of these things after 9/11 that we were able to get guidance from the Mayor's office and NYPD. All of these things played a big part towards transforming the image of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. When you shut down and dismantle these things, we've now moved from 59% in public trust 3 years ago down to 8%, from the highest yet again to the lowest. So my point being, whether it is Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Barbados, Grenada, Jamaica, wherever, we are behind the 8 ball, and the systems, the technology, the units are there. We were able to form, you have to form a final point on this, a special operational unit to be able to have intelligence driven only with that operational unit. In the United States, other countries, you have that like SWAT teams and so forth. When we formed that team, we put an end to kidnapping. It's the first time ever, I think, in the Caribbean, we were solving kidnappings, being able to target the kidnappers, kick down doors, intercept cars, rescue the kidnapped victim, and arrest the kidnapper. 12 of those took place. Never happened before. It put an end to kidnapping, home invasion, extortion, because you need specific elite units, highly polygraphed, drug tested on a regular basis, monitoring their finances. These are the things that are required. This can transform every arm in the protective services throughout the Caribbean. What we need is to be able to be brave enough and bold enough to get into the second quarter of the 21st century policing.
I was going to ask about whether body cams, which could be accessible to media afterwards, couldn't be as part of the standard operating procedures. In fact, I know that just in the past week, the Jamaicans for Justice organization was protesting in Jamaica about the lack of that in the Jamaica police force. So I wanted to get the former leaders in the police services to talk to that. But that was answered by former Commissioner Gregory.
I'm out here because I'm very much concerned, and as a law-abiding citizen, a little baby has been murdered and being covered up by the state, assisted by the Guyana police force. It is clear now that the Guyana police force is complicit in this murder of this little child.
The first I want to point out is that there's a difference between a strategy, a tactic, and a plan. And the police force in this case demonstrated the absence of a crisis management plan that is scenario driven. A crisis management plan would not just simply say, here are our aspirations and general views, but it would have specific operational protocols, standard operating procedures. And as soon as that event occurs, that crisis management plan, crisis communications plan, is thrown into operation. What we saw in this case was people just didn't know what to do. And even when they spoke, they didn't know what to say. And it brings us back to the question and the issue that was discussed, and that is, what do you do when a civilian receives a data entry person makes an entry of data on an issue so sensitive? A crisis communication plan would have all of that. Crisis communication plan should also include who should be interfacing with the public, what platforms and channels should be used for what types of communication. And this was absent. It was not only absent from the police from higher up at the policy level. You had no less than the vice president fanning the likelihood what has been formed as a viewpoint that this was a murder. And then at the end of the investigation, the government trying to walk it back as simply a case of someone of drowning, whether that is the case or not.
I
I
want
just
to
want to
ask,
make, go
I
ahead.
want to
Before
ask Mr. Griffith and Mr. Slow, how have you, in your tenures as senior police officers in your respective police service and police force, guarded against political interference in instructing you what not to say and what to say to the public?
Go, Gary. Gary, you go first.
Wow, that's smack over my head. I recall during COVID, there were about 20 police chiefs that actually attacked the most powerful man on the planet and told him that the comments he was making, this was President Trump at the time, it was affecting security in their area. And that is the type of it might seem as very arrogant, but in the Caribbean, the perception that commissioners of police, they are supposed to be puppets or an animal of the state, and they're supposed to have full respect and to listen to and adhere to the policies of the prime minister or president. That is not true. There are things. My military, I spent 17 years in the military, and then I was also commissioner of police and minister of national security. I know the role of all, and you have to be very careful that if there's something called an illegal command, and if there's something that is unethical, incorrect, or illegal based on ignorance or deliberate, you have to deliberately stand firm. As a minister of national security, I actually stood firm against my own government when they had live sport that was instrumental in many murders. And I had to go against my own government and stand firm on it. I had to do the same as commissioner of police, where during COVID, the prime minister was alluding to the fact that the police should go ahead and arrest persons in their homes if it is that more than 5 persons converge. The reason for it is that the prime minister was totally ignorant of his own law. He didn't understand in Trinidad and Tobago at the time we had something known as public health regulations. As stupid as it was, if 25 persons were in a house linemen, the police couldn't do anything. If 5 of them left the house and went next door to bathe in the beach, we could arrest them. But I had to adhere to the law, and I was not going to be pressured by the directive of the politicians. It happened in 2011 when we had the state of emergency. The police foolishly took pressure from the politicians. 500 young men were arrested, and hundreds of millions had to be paid because they were wrongfully arrested. So there must be a line where you must respect the persons in authority. But you must understand that a commissioner of police is an independent head where even though he reports to the National Security Council, he must not in any way be compromised because he wants to keep his job. Let me take this opportunity quickly to speak about the crisis management. What you spoke about there, Mr. Williams, there are things that can be done. It happened after 9/11, after Trinidad and Tobago's attempted coup. We formed a commission of inquiry with a number of things to deal with that preemptive strike, which was the National Operations Center, where during the 1990 coup, different arms of the protective services, one head didn't know what the other was doing. All the intelligence, had it been accumulated, we would have known what the Jamaat intended to do. We did not. That National Operations Center is something must be done regional security as well, where we must have that operational center with different arms in the Caribbean that we can share information in real time. So a gang leader is leaving Trinidad Airport, we can now immediately contact Guyana to let them know this man is landed, monitor him as soon as he enters. We don't have that. And there are other things such as the Energy Sector Security Initiative and National Security Alert State, which is color-coded, that lifts the threat level based on the escalation of the threat. So you don't need to call a state of emergency. So it moves from green to amber to red to black. So there are many different things as it pertains to that crisis management you spoke about. If that is done, it will assist everybody to know. It's like an idiot's guide. It provides you with a template to understand your role and function if the threat escalates, inclusive of the public, inclusive of the private sector, whether it be hotels and so forth, so they know what is required. If we implement these things, it is not difficult. We did it in Trinidad and Tobago. As I said, that's what transformed the image of the police service. It can be done. People just need to stick and understand what is done in developed countries, and it can be done in the Caribbean.
Mr. Slow, you wanted to go?
Yes, I want to jump in to say what Gary is talking about there. Yes, but the thing about that, a fundamental issue here that you have to have people with confidence and competence You have to have a commissioner of police, as Gary indicated, who knows the law, who can then advise the politician. This is not the law. We cannot do this. And I am saying that that is what is absent in Guyana. You have people in these positions that don't know what they are about. And it comes to the point, Vivian mentioned it, about the vice president making a statement saying that this is murder. Now the vice president perhaps filled a vacuum because the crime chief, who is a deputy commissioner, and the commissioner of police, if they had come out and gave the correct information, then there would not have been the opportunity for the vice president to jump out and to make that statement, really not trying to claw back. It all comes back, as we had said before, about people being competent, people being qualified to be in certain senior positions. Because if you have people who are in these positions who don't know what is going on, from the time the politicians say do this, they are going to do it. And that is exactly what we see happening. In terms of crisis management, I used to be in charge of the operations section in the Guyana Police Force. It requires the rank of a deputy commissioner. I was an assistant commissioner when I retired. I filled that position for about 3 years. We had what we call operational orders and standing operational procedures, right, which tells you step-by-step action to be taken and by whom in certain situations. So it would have said, if it has happened on Monday, if it's a situation where you have crowd disorder, crowd unrest, step-by-step action that is to be taken to deal with it. But those things are absent, as we have seen. And because of the absence of those, I shouldn't jump to say they're absent. Perhaps they're there because when we left, they were there. But people are not trained and people don't know what they are to make sure that they are properly implemented. Because having these guidelines and not having it filtered to the people who have to act on it, you are going to find yourself in serious problems. No use to write all of these fancy SOPs and standing orders and all of that. If the people who are to act are not aware that they are to act, you're just wasting people, you're wasting time.
I would only add that there is a broader context out of which many of the elements we're seeing and talking about are operating. We are in Guyana in a political season, and some of the politicians are making statements not with regard to this particular incident, but they're making statements with a view to the upcoming elections. I would say only that for now.
Professor Ivelaw Griffith, our guest today on Caribbean Tea. Joining us also was former Commissioner of Police of Trinidad and Tobago, Gary Griffith, and former Assistant Commissioner of Guyana, Paul Slow. This has been a special episode of Caribbean Tea.